Behind the picket fences and manicured lawns, darkness lurked. In the heart of normalcy lived a monster, a man who blended seamlessly into the fabric of everyday life, hiding a sinister secret. This is the chilling tale of a neighbor from hell. Jeffrey Dahmer was an American criminal who specialized in men. Between 1978 and 1991, he murdered 17 men. For over 13 years, Dahmer sought out men, mostly African Americans, in rainbow bars, malls, and bus stops. He would lure them to his home with promises of money or a night of love, get them drunk, and then commit the crimes. Dahmer often photographed the cooking process with a film camera so that he could recall each of his actions and relive the inhumane experience. Also, in his refrigerator, he liked to keep the trophies as a keepsake. Dahmer was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on May 21, 1960, to Lionel and Joyce Dahmer. He was described as an energetic and happy child until the age of 4. However, surgery to repair a double hernia seemed to change him. He became a much less active child. Visibly depressed, he became even more withdrawn after the birth of his younger brother and frequent family moves. By his teenage years, he was withdrawn, tense, and largely alone. Yeah, I always had a feeling that it wasn't right. I don't think there's a person who can infringe on another person's life and think it's right. Dahmer claims that his violent and psychopathic tendencies began around the age of 14, but it seems that the breakdown of his parents' marriage and their acrimonious divorce a few years later may have been the catalyst for turning bad thoughts into actions. By the time of his first atrocity, Dahmer was firmly hooked on alcohol. He dropped out of Ohio State University after a quarter of a semester, and his recently married father insisted he join the Army. Dahmer enlisted in late December 1978 and was deployed to Germany shortly thereafter. His drinking problems persisted, and as a result, he was discharged from the Army in early 1981. He is not believed to have committed any crimes while in the Army. After his discharge, Dahmer returned home to Ohio. An arrest for disorderly conduct prompted Dahmer's father to send him to live with his grandmother in Wisconsin, but his drinking problems continued, and the following summer, Dahmer was arrested for indecent exposure. He was arrested again in 1986 when 2 boys accused him of exhibitionism. Dahmer got off with a year of probation. Dahmer's victims were 17 people between 1978 and 1991. He carefully selected them on the fringes of society. They were often vagrants, travelers, or semi-criminal elements. This made their disappearances less conspicuous and less likely to catch him. Don't drink with just anyone. Dahmer's first atrocity occurred just after high school graduation in June 1978, when he picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks and drove him home to his parents' house. Dahmer got the young man drunk. When Hicks tried to leave, Dahmer struck him in the head and strangled him with a barbell. Dahmer then covered his tracks by burying all excess behind his parents' house. In August 2012, nearly 2 decades after Dahmer's passing, his childhood home in Bath, Ohio, where he committed his first atrocity in 1978, was put up for sale. Its owner, musician Chris Butler, said the property would make a great home if the buyer could get over the horror factor. Only 9 years later, in September 1987, Dahmer committed his second crime. The victim was Stephen Twomey. They checked into a hotel room and had a drink. When Dahmer woke up, he found Twomey dead, with no memory of the previous night's events. Dahmer moved Stephen in a huge suitcase to the basement of his grandmother's house, did his dirty deeds, and covered his tracks. In September 1989, Dahmer got extremely lucky. A tryst with a 13-year-old Laotian boy led to Dahmer's conviction on child molestation charges. He pleaded guilty, claiming that the boy looked much older. While awaiting sentencing in the case, Dahmer again used his grandmother's basement for terrible purposes. In March 1989, Anthony Sears, an aspiring model, became Dahmer's victim. It went the same old way. At his trial on child molestation charges in May 1989, Dahmer was a model of remorse, eloquently arguing in his defense about how he saw the error of his ways and that his arrest marked a turning point in his life. His defense attorney argued that he needed treatment, not incarceration. The judge agreed, sentencing Dahmer to 1 year in prison on day release. which allowed him to work at his job during the day and return to prison at night. Dahmer was released early after serving only 10 months. On May 27, 1991, Dahmer's neighbor, Sandra Smith, called the police to report that she had seen an Asian boy running naked down the street. When police arrived, the boy's speech was incoherent. Police officers took Dahmer's word, the word of a white man from a predominantly poor African-American community, that the boy was his 19-year-old lover. In fact, the boy was 14 and the brother of a Laotian teenager whom Dahmer had molested 3 years earlier. Police escorted Dahmer and the boy home. Clearly not wanting to be drawn into the rainbow games of the two strange men, embarrassed, they only took a cursory look around before leaving. As soon as the police left the scene, Dahmer ruined the boy and continued his usual rituals. Had the police conducted even a rudimentary search, they would have found Dahmer's 12th victim, Tony Hughes. The perpetrator is sitting right across from you, talking about himself. That's the only person. Not parents, not society, not pornography. I mean, that's all it is. Just excuses. Dahmer. The fun ended after his arrest on July 22, 1991. 2 police officers were led to Dahmer's home by another jogger, Tracy Edwards, a 32-year-old African-American man who was roaming the streets with handcuffs dangling from his wrist. They decided to investigate the man's claims that a strange dude had drugged and restrained him. They arrived at Dahmer's apartment, where he calmly offered to retrieve the keys to Edwards' handcuffs. Edwards claimed that the knife Dahmer had threatened him with was in the bedroom. The officers were more forthcoming this time. One of them entered the bedroom to corroborate what Edwards said. He noticed Polaroid photographs with racy details of many of Dahmer's gruesome deeds. Given his love of trophy collecting and photography, there was enough evidence to put him away for life. Dahmer's trial began in January 1992. The jury decided to believe the prosecution that Dahmer was fully aware that his actions were evil, but chose to commit them anyway. On February 15, 1992, they returned after approximately 10 hours of deliberation to find him guilty and sane on all counts. He was sentenced to 15 consecutive life sentences in prison. Dahmer reportedly adapted well to prison life, although he was initially kept separate from all other inmates. Later, he convinced the authorities to allow him to integrate more fully with the other inmates. However, this is what ruined him. Dahmer was murdered on November 28, 1994, by his cellmate Christopher Scarver. As Scarver himself said, the reason was a personal grudge against Dahmer. Many more shocking details of chilling crime stories from around the world await. Subscribe to stay informed.